You're watching Service Drive, exclusively on CBT News.
Service departments continue to invest heavily in advisor training, but many dealerships still struggle to see lasting results. So what's going wrong? Joining us now is Lee Harkins, President and CEO of M5 Management Services, to discuss 5 key reasons service advisor training often fails and what dealers can do about it. So thank you so much, Lee, for taking the time out of your busy schedule there, helping dealers all over the country, I might add, in their fixed ops departments, and doing a fine job at that. So let's talk about this. Where do you think they dropped the ball?
Well, Jim, there's a number of areas. All right. Now, the first thing that I see, and I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of stores over the years, and they've had advisor training, manufacturer or whatever, and nothing worked. And they're like, what happened? And so we start talking about how they led up to the training that they had. Yeah. First of all, you got to have an objective. That's right. Why are we going to do training? Yeah. You're not going to go out and touch their foreheads and heal them, and all of a sudden they're going to get you great NPS scores and high value per ticket. It doesn't work that way.
That's right.
So that's the number one thing I see.
Yeah. I see that also in many areas of the dealership. No defined objectives, and even sales training. For the front end. But so continue. Yep. What else?
So I think the very first thing is the objectives. All right. Now, the objectives need to be. They can't be. I want to increase CSI. That is part of it. All right, but what about tire sales? What about your sales performance? Where are we going with this? The challenge that we have in service, the biggest challenge I think we have, is consistency. All right. What happens in our stores is one day we're very consistent, the next day the wheels fall off the bus. Right. So the very first thing is we've got to be consistent. The best way to be consistent is to have a written process. And this is what I see they don't do. And without that written process, it's going to fall on its face. Yeah. Because it's sort of like my wife. My wife will say, go to the grocery store and get me blah, 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 blah. And she runs through the list, right? And I go and I forget 2 or 3 things. Absolutely. I get the wrong mushroom. I get the stems in the mushrooms, and we weren't supposed to do that. And it was all because we didn't write it down.
That's exactly right.
I'm a visual person.
Yep.
And 70% of our customers are visual. So, and us as well. So without it written down, you have no plan.
That's right.
All right. It doesn't work that way.
That's right.
So
and also, if you have 4 or 5 different advisors out on the service drive, and you don't have it written down, and you don't have a process, all of a sudden there's 4 or 5 different processes, right? Because everybody adds their own special sauce to it, or skips a step, or doesn't do something, or does more steps than they're supposed to. And now you've got kind of like this quilt effect, if you will, of what a process is supposed to be. And probably none of them are even close to what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And what happens is that a lot of advisors that have been in the store for a period of time, they're standing there and they'll say, well, they want us to do it this way, but I do it this way.
Exactly. I've heard that many times.
And that's where the consistency falls apart.
Yep.
Now, the thing that's most interesting about this is I'll go and do a training session with a group of service managers. And I say to them, okay, I want you to write down the main steps in what you believe should be the interactive process between your advisor and the customer. 90% of the time, Jim, we're dead on exactly the same steps. So if we're all singing off the same hymnal of the book, or same page out of the hymnal, if we're all singing off the same page, why is it we're not consistent in delivering that product?
Right.
All right. And it's because we have no way to measure the performance to a standard. There's got to be a standard there. And if it ain't in writing, as we've said many, many times, it's never been said.
That's right.
And so if you bring them in and you sit them down and we're going to train them and we're going to do this, and all you do is talk, it just goes in one ear and out the other.
That's right. That's right. And you then have service advisors that will often come up with reasons that they don't take that particular step or implement that process. And they say, well, it doesn't really work for me. I hear what you're saying, and I know you want me to do this, but that doesn't often happen. And then of course you've got everyone in the room, so now everybody's taking notes on what the speaker, or not the speaker, but the other service advisors saying, and then they chime in, and before you know it, you've got the consensus of the room is let's just stick to what we were doing rather than saying let's all agree on a process.
And that's what they wanted to change, and that's the reason why they went with advisor training.
That's right.
So I was working with a group up in New York, and so we did it. We did some manager training, and then the follow up was going to be we would do advisor training. So I had all the managers in the room, and I said, okay. I said, what do you want your advisors to do? Take me through the steps. And we went through the steps, and now instead of me coming in and imposing a process on them, it is their process.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the keys to advisor training.
Yeah.
Is they have to take possession of it.
That's right.
And I can go in. Yeah, I can go in with a CAN program and say, here's the CAN, everybody adapt to it.
Yep.
But that only lasts as long as I'm there.
That's right.
And so I don't play that game. What I like to do is to make sure, Jim, that the process is their process. So we basically, from our standpoint, would do a blank piece of paper and say, all right, let's go key to key. Tell me everything you want to do.
Right.
And what's interesting is we try to get the advisors involved in the development of that process. And I think that's one of the keys to it, is to have the advisor, or all the advisors, or a group of advisors involved in that development.
Right.
And if you impose it on them, I don't like imposing. And I see so many people that impose it on them. Just say, here's what you're going to do.
Right.
Well, I don't like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do it.
That's right.
We don't have consistency. The accountability to the process, once we have the process developed, is critical. All right. Now, what the accountability part of it is, now we have a standard for the manager to manage to the process. All right. You can do that through observation. You could do it through training. You'll always have a fallback position with the written process.
Yeah.
Now what we want to do, now we start ratcheting down the adherence to that process. There is no wiggle room. We take out of the equation that advisor saying, well, here, they want us to do it this way, but I do it this way. We don't want that. We get everybody to agree up front. And I think this is important, is that everybody agrees this is our process. Now let's rock. And now we start going. And now what happens is we become very consistent, because we can put into that process the extra value points that we want to build. All right. Now, once we do that, and once we do our heads up and down, it's etched in concrete.
Yeah.
Now we have to have compliance to that process and adherence to that process, and that's what's most important. Forget about the sales performance right now. It's the process.
Right.
And we become consistent, and the sales are going to come.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's no question about it. You got to, as they say, trust the process, right? But and there does that accountability factor. It has got to be there. If it's not, then the whole program is a waste of time, everybody's time, because as soon as the one service advisor sees that, oh, so and so is getting away with whatever they want to do out here, and there's no penalty, there's no accountability, then, as I said, everybody then goes back to, okay, we got out of training. We yes them to death in the training. Yeah, we're going to do it, boss. Yeah, this sounds great. Yeah, we're all on the team. And then they do a wink and a nod, and they go, listen, as soon as the trainer leaves, as soon as the manager leaves, as soon as the fixed ops director leaves, let's go back to what we were doing. And and then of course the team all covers for one another. Oh, no, we're doing it. But you're exactly right. That accountability element of this is crucial, that the process is being upheld, right? I mean, it can't be any other way.
What has to happen, Jim, is there has to be a consequence for not following the process.
Right.
Now, the first time we'll counsel.
Mm-hmm.
The second time we counsel, the third, the fourth we'll counsel. But there's going to come a time that there's going to be a consequence. And that person who's made the conscious effort to stand there and say, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Well, now it's time for a public execution. And you got to take, and you might edit that out, but there's got to be a consequence, and you got to let everybody know this is how we're going to do it.
Right.
And
what do you do in the case that public execution might have to be on your star pupil, the person that's been there a while, feels as though they're bulletproof, they're hitting their numbers, any dealership, in a 5-mile radius of your dealership would love to have that individual, but they're not following the process. And you can't win them over. You sit them down, you counsel them, you tell them, look, this is very important to the rest of the team. I understand you've got your own way, but you're hurting you're hurting the overall team. You got to, how do you manage that situation?
Well, the first thing is, if any manager out there, director out there, that's been in the business long enough, he knows or she knows that the entire store changes after that cancer is cut out.
This is true. This is true.
And you have to do it.
Yeah.
And in my business, in your business, in their business, we've all seen it.
And we've all seen it.
It brings everybody down.
Yep.
And I'm in a store right now that we have one of those.
Yeah.
And we just talked about it yesterday. We got to have a public execution and send that message through the staff. We're not going to run around and act like a bunch of hairy-knuckled ogres and beat everybody up. That's not what we're going to do. But we have a process, and this is what makes us consistent. This is what makes us money, and this is what we're going to do. And hey, if you don't want to do it, no issue. You just don't work here anymore.
That's right. That's right. And usually, if that actual threat is there, then that person probably 75% of the time comes around, right? You always get that 10 to 25% of the individuals that think their ego is going to take over or what have you, and they're like, well, then if that's the way it's going to be, I'll go down the road or whatever. Not always a good move for that individual to make that career decision, but I agree with you. I think that you've got to cut that cancer out, and yes, it does affect the rest of the team. They're like, great, because he's rowing in or she's rowing in a different direction than we are. You're telling us one thing, and he or she's doing something completely different, and you're allowing it. You owe it to the rest of the team, don't you, as a leader, to make sure that you do take care of that rogue person, to say, no, we're not doing that here. This is the way we're doing it, and this was given, right.
There's some cases, Jim, that you have to strip them of their influence. There's positive leaders and there's negative leaders.
Right.
And that negative leader, misery loves company.
That's right.
So, you see a lot of technicians that are negative leaders.
Yeah.
And I'm dealing with one now. And so he starts running his mouth about how bad things are and holding court on everybody. Yeah. And he's got a crowd around him. Well, he's poisoning everybody. And, I've seen stores, I had it happen to me when I was in store, that one of the loudest mouth technicians that I had, I brought him in and fired him. And he sat there in front of him and he goes, I don't want to go. I said, okay, you don't have a choice. You no longer have a parking space here.
Yeah.
All right. So you got to go.
That's right.
And he started crying.
Yeah, wow.
But he didn't realize it. And there's people, occasionally you can salvage them, and I'm not that person to say fire.
Yeah,
but
sure.
There comes a time.
Yeah. Sometimes it's even a good idea to say, look, take a few days off. I've done this before. Take a few days off and think about your career here. But when you come back, you're on my program or you're out of here, and I want you to think hard about it, because maybe you do need a change. You know what I mean? Maybe you are better off at a different dealership and with your own program. Maybe you can spread that around and they're going to like it. But you mandatory. Today's Monday. Come back here on Thursday morning and you decide. You tell me why I should keep you, and we can have that discussion. Because otherwise, if I don't like what I hear, I don't like what I see, by the following Monday you're gone. Do we have a deal? Done.
That's it.
It's
that simple.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It gives them some time to think about it.
I've seen people, Jim, do, complete about face.
Yeah.
And completely change, and they're one of your strongest supporters if you can salvage them.
Yes, very good point. That's a very good point. Sometimes you don't know, too, what's going on in their own personal lives. You know what I mean? Maybe they're going through marriage problems or health. Maybe their kids are sick or they're, whatever the case might be. And sometimes that comes out, too. Like, oh, wow, I'm taking it out on you, a little displaced aggression here, but here's what's happening in my life. So.
Sure.
It's important. So this has been a great session. If I was a dealer today and I said, Lee, what do you, other than what we talked about today, because this is some really good stuff here, what are some key things that you want me to focus on as a dealer principal with my relating to my service department that I need to keep my eye on as we go into the balance of 2026?
All right. So I would tell you, I'll do dealer meetings. I'll do some 20 group presentations and dealer meetings with manufacturers. And I tell them almost every session that I do is you must ask 3 questions every single morning of your service department. Number 1 is how many hours did we produce yesterday? And we want a clear, definite number, never about 150. Exactly, 150.3, right. 110. We got to have that number. Yeah. All right. So that's the same as the new car sales. There's not a dealer out there that doesn't call their sales manager or have reports sent to them on a daily basis of how many units they have over the curb. That's right. Our units are front rate hours. Then I ask them to ask what is the effective labor rate. Yeah. All right. Not the customer effective rate, the overall effective rate. The overall effective rate is what we take to the bank. The third thing I would ask is how many customer pay repair orders did we write? Okay. Now the whole theory is, Jim, the dealers can improve their performance in their service departments by raising their expectations. All right. So if I'm talking to my service manager and he says 100, 100, 100, 100, 100 for the last 2 weeks, right? Now we raise it to 110. Yeah. A 10% increase in production in a mechanical shop can give them another $100,000 to $300,000 a year in additional net. Wow. So you got to be expecting more. Yeah. Then I would ask them to ask some optional questions such as how many customer pay tires did we sell? Because customer pay tires is all about retention, as everybody knows. Tires, sales per transaction, either revenue or hours per ticket. I would also ask them to consider video MPI penetration number. That's one that a lot of stores really fight. We got to get that number up. That is just a no-brainer to do video MPIs. Oh, I agree. No question about it. Lee Harkins, President and CEO of M5 Management Services, helping dealers all over the country every day. These guys do an incredible job. If you think that you might be leaving another 100,000 or maybe $1 million on the table in your fixed ops department, this is one of the guys that can help you get that $1 million. And he's got an incredible reputation among dealers to do just that. So, Lee, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Very much appreciate it. Always a pleasure to chat with you, and thank you for having me.
These are great points, and I know the dealers and service managers are going to get a lot out of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching Service Drive, exclusively on CBT News.